Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay. Before we begin, our tradition is to go around the room and introduce ourselves. If I may, I'll begin. My name is Roy.
I'm David.
Rich.
Roger Pinnell.
Okay.
Zuriel.
Okay.
Michelle.
Leor.
Michael.
Well, my name is John Wessel.
Andre.
Bob Siedelkamp.
Henry Rabinowitz.
Jeff Akeley.
Michael.
My name is John.
James.
My name is Ray Dyer.
My name is Oswaldo.
My name is Taquan.
Jerry.
Tom Morrissey.
I'm Jack.
I'm Aurelio.
I'm Jerry Jones.
I'm Tom Bruein.
I'm Richard Azzolini.
Joe.
Richard.
Michael.
Hardy. Cass.
George.
I'm Stephen.
Peter.
My name is Clint.
My name is Mark.
My name is Michael. I'm Shantanu.
Before I introduce our guest speaker, I had asked if there was anyone here for the first time. And how do you pronounce your name? One more time?
Zuriel.
Zuriel raised his hand. Is there anyone else who's here for the first time joining us?
Jeff.
Jeff. Welcome to you all. So today's speaker is Neil Grungras. Neil is the founder and executive director of ORAM, Organization for Refuge, Asylum and Migration. ORAM is a San Francisco-based nonprofit providing international and domestic advocacy, education, and representation on behalf of LGBTQ refugees. In addition to directly assisting refugees who have escaped countries such as Iran, ORAM works closely with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the U.S. Department of State, and several community groups to establish consciousness and international protection standards for these vulnerable refugees. Welcome to you, Neil.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here. I really cherish the opportunity to talk to you about what we do and about what you might be able to do to help a brother you don't know yet or a sister you don't know yet. I'd like to, with your permission, to speak for 20 minutes or so and then to open up to Q&A, since sitting and listening for whole hours is a stretch of the attention span. A little bit about our organization. ORAM, which stands for Organization for Refuge, Asylum and Migration, took on this little task of assisting LGBT refugees. I formed ORAM 3 years ago, and we became active about 2 years ago. I formed ORAM in response to what I saw as the abandonment of LGBTQ refugees by the mainstream refugee assistance community worldwide. It seemed to me, after doing refugee law for 25 years, that I was never hearing about LGBTI refugees. I was seeing some in my own law practice here in San Francisco and in doing international refugee work later at NGOs, but the subject never came up openly. It was in the closet. And I started to think, this is really strange. I'm seeing case after case after case, and yet there's no literature about this. We know what the statistics are worldwide. We know what the condition is of LGBTIs worldwide. People are escaping, and they're going somewhere. Why isn't anyone talking about it? And why isn't our own community doing anything about it, about this phenomenon, about the people? And I started to dig a bit deeper. And then I put the picture together. There are 75 countries in the world which criminalize same-sex consenting relations, 75 countries. There are an additional 20 countries or so which don't criminalize same-sex relations, but where you can get imprisoned, where you can get killed, where your family can what's called honor kill you for being gay or lesbian or trans, and where the police will not protect you at all if that happens. I think that that's most of the countries in the world. And the picture that I started to put together was that the people who are escaping this persecution probably outnumbered every other kind of refugee in the world. Because most other refugees are identified by their nationality or by their faith or by their political opinion, but these refugees go across every national border, across every faith, across every political opinion. It's 5 to 10% of the human population that's persecuted in more than half of the countries in the world. So that's the reality of being LGBT around the world. What happens to these people? Most of them never escape. Most of them never get to leave their homes. Most of them live in the closet, live in hiding. The ones who don't succeed in doing that are found out and are imprisoned or killed. Many are sexually abused, and I'll talk about that in a little while. And a very small percentage have the fortitude to actually get up and help themselves and cross a national border and go try to get protection somewhere else, or go try to move somewhere else. The vast majority just don't have the inner strength to do it. When they reach that country of transit, their struggle begins. And now we're talking about a very small percentage, remember. Those 5 to 10% of the 5 to 10% who have the wherewithal to cross an international border, and try to get somewhere safe. And you would think that that's the end of their saga, right? That's where the movie would end. You'd see the credits. That's really just the beginning of their saga. Because most countries that you'd escape to share cultures, values, hatreds, whatever it is, with the countries that you've come from. It's the way cultures work. They spread across international borders. And what happens to most of our clients is that they will escape a country where things are very bad and enter another country where things may be just as bad. Sometimes a little bit better in some ways, sometimes a little bit worse in other ways. I'll give you an example in a little while about Iran and Turkey, which is where ORAM has a project on the ground right now. It was our first project. And I'll give you some real examples, and perhaps Jack and Aurelio will be able to help a little bit with their experiences talking to a couple of our refugees who are in Turkey, and explain to you what their life is like. So let's put this in a bit of a broader perspective before we get too deep into the life of one refugee. There are 10 million refugees in the world today. 10 million people who've run away from one country and entered another one. It's a very approximate number, obviously. And those are refugees who've run away because they've been persecuted because of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or because of their membership in a social group, which is oftentimes being LGBTI. There are today about 150 million forced migrants in the world. That's people who've crossed international boundaries because of wars, because of mass persecution, because of terrorism, or because more and more because of climate change. That number is expected to rise to over 1 billion in the next 10 to 20 years. So the world that we're looking at today is very, very different from the world that we're going to be living in. Most of us will be living in 10 or 20 years. It's going to be a world with mass migrations. People crossing borders en masse for water or to escape hunger. And it's already happening. It's just that we don't see it here as clearly as it's seen in other areas of the world. What's the part of LGBTs in this? Well, what happens whenever you have situations of crisis or situations of not enough is that those who are marginalized have even less than the others. And those who are marginalized don't have the connections to get the basic necessities that others are getting. We're already seeing that with regard to LGBTs, and you'll see it even more as these mass population flows continue. So, where is this happening? The largest pockets of persecution today of LGBTs are the Middle East and Africa. When we started ORAM 2 years ago, virtually all the stories you would have heard of would have been in the Middle East. And this is actually one of the most disturbing things that I'm here to tell you today. You know about conditions in Iran. Most of you know that the death penalty applies for homosexuality in 7 countries. 6 of those are in the Middle East. One of them is Nigeria, where the death penalty applies in the north, where Sharia governs. And that situation is bad enough, because really in most of the Middle East, even the countries that, as I was saying before, don't criminalize homosexuality, you are very likely to get killed by your family or by neighbors if it's found out that you're LGBT. What's happened in the last 2 years is a completely new phenomenon has arisen, new in terms of the media, which is mass persecution of LGBTs in Africa. Most of you have heard about what's happening in Uganda. You've heard about the case in Malawi. You've heard about cases in Rwanda, in Burundi, and Kenya. And what is happening as the conflict between East and West, between the perceived colonizers and the native populations sharpens, is that the battle lines form on the backs of whom? On the backs of homosexuals. Because in many of these places, in the Middle East as in Africa, homosexuality is sold and perceived to be a Western phenomenon that's being imposed on clean, ethical native cultures by the evil Westerners. And the concept of living openly as a homosexual is unknown in many of these places, as President Ahmadinejad told you a couple of years ago. And let me tell you, he knew what he was talking about. He knows that there are lots of gays in Iran. He knows that there are gay parties in Iran. But he also knows that living openly as a homosexual is forbidden, and it's punishable by the death penalty. And that's what he was saying when he was saying that there's no homosexuality. We don't have that phenomenon in Iran. He didn't mean that people don't want to be with people of the same sex. He meant that you can be killed for being with people of the same sex. And that's the reality in most places. So what's happening in Africa is, as people are daring to come out of the closet, all of the rage of many, many years against colonialism, the hatred that built up and the anger that built up is being focused on the few gays that have the nerve, that have the daring, whatever it is that they have, and you need a lot to come out of the closet and to demand the right to live as who you are. And those people are paying with their lives very often. So we're seeing a shift now from a condition where the Middle East was the most virulent place for gays and lesbians and transgenders, to where Africa is becoming that place. In the Middle East, things haven't been quiet either. How many of you have heard about what's happening in Iraq to gays? Is that has been in the media just a bit here, but not too much. About 700 gays have been killed in Iraq in the last few years. What happened with the American occupation is that it became safe for gays in Iraq to begin coming out of the closet in the safe areas of Baghdad and the Green Zone. And the phenomenon of homosexuality has come out of the closet. Of course, these very same people were gay and lesbian all their lives. But now they've perhaps dared to be a tiny bit more open. Or to seek one another's company. And what's happening is that paramilitary groups, police, private civilians are targeting these people. As I said, 700 people have been killed. The methods, people are usually tortured. There's a very popular method that's being used to execute gays. If they're not hanged, then typically what happens is that super glue is injected into the anus, and then the person is force-fed diuretics until the stomach explodes. and the streets are strewn with these people who've been caught. A few weeks ago, one of the safe houses of a group of gays in Iraq was found by the police. 5 of the men disappeared completely. One of them was found in a hospital with his throat slashed, and the house was burned down. That's the level of hatred. And let's not misunderstand. This is not just homophobia. This is a caustic blend of homophobia and xenophobia and hatred of the American occupation. That's all being directed at the gays. Some of these people, very few of these people, manage to escape. And they get to a place like Syria or a place like Lebanon or Jordan. And this is what I was talking about before, these countries share cultures with Iraq to the extent that being out of the closet is absolutely impossible in these countries. You can be beaten up and killed in Jordan or Syria just to the same extent that you can be in Iraq. And some of our clients come from those countries, in fact. So people live in hiding over there. Many of them are afraid to come out of the closet, even to the authorities. And this is where our activity kicks in. And they live in hiding. And sometimes they live in hiding for the rest of their lives. Sometimes their lives aren't too long. Sometimes they're caught by the authorities in those countries and kicked back home. Most of them are so deeply ashamed of who they are. And, I think homophobia is ultimately the biggest enemy if you have to prioritize your enemies. Many people are so ashamed by who they are that they will not come out even if their life depends on it. One of my first cases was a gay man from Afghanistan on the Turkish-Iranian border. He had been denied refugee, applied for refugee status with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and it just did not occur to him for a second that he could tell anybody in a position of authority that he was a homosexual, because in the place where he comes from, you can easily be killed for being homosexual, and you would never tell anybody that in Afghanistan. His father had tried to kill him, and that's why he escaped home. And he was living in Turkey for 4 years. He had applied for refugee status based on political opinion, which was a lie. He had never been persecuted because of his political opinion. The UNHCR found out that he was lying, which is very easy to do in an interview, and he was denied. After he was denied, he was kept for 3 years waiting for his case to be appealed. And finally, when he found us, was the first time that he talked to someone face to face who said, "I understand about being gay. We're gay too. We can help you." And we took his case through the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. But he would never have done that had someone not reached out to him and said, "It's okay. We're here for you," because there is no symbol whatsoever at the United Nations headquarters that it's okay to be gay. And the people who adjudicate your case are very, very often very homophobic. I'll talk about that in a second. So this young man was, in Turkey, refugees aren't allowed to work. Refugees are required to live in small towns and aren't allowed to work. This is all refugees. If you have family, or if you have compatriots, or if you have co-religionists, you can somehow make your way through those years of struggle to get out. But if you're LGBT, you are targeted by that very community. So the last people he was going to go look for were other Afghanis, because they would have killed him themselves. He was all by himself, and he had to survive, and he did what many of our clients do. He sold his body. That's all he had. And it wasn't every day, because in Turkey, a trick will get you a meal. It wasn't once a day. It was 3 times a day that he would have to turn tricks. And I asked him at some point when he felt safe enough with me, I asked him, "Are you having safe sex? Are you watching out for yourself?" He said, "What are you talking about? Not even once. You can't get condoms here, and even if you could, the Johns wouldn't agree to use the condoms." So do the math. He'd been doing sex trade for 3 years, 3 times a day, unprotected. And what are the chances that he's going to eventually be safe somewhere and healthy somewhere? So this young man has gone from childhood sexual abuse to abuse by elders to threatened threats of being killed by his families, to sex trade, and maybe he'll get to safety one day, and maybe he just won't. And that is the reality of most of our people around the world. That's when I decided to leave my cushy job at an international organization and to form ORAM. And I found out that the very organizations that were supposed to be helping these people were really not helping them. I went to the U.S. Refugee Corps director, who I'd worked with for many years before. Very nice woman, who I don't think is homophobic. And I said to her, why don't you have any gay refugees arriving here? The U.S. accepts 80,000 refugees a year. Why don't I hear about any programs to assist LGBT refugees? I mean, these are the most persecuted people in the world. And she said, well, we have nothing against them. It's just that they're not coming forward for help. So if somebody actually comes into the office and says, I'm gay and I've been persecuted, can you help me? We'll help them. But nobody's done that, or very few people have done that. I went one step back, because those cases get to the U.S. through the UN system. And I started to talk to people in the UN system and said, well, what's going on here? It's easy to ask those questions when you're over 50 and you've been working with people for a really long time. They take you a little more seriously. And the people in the UN told me the same thing. They said, we have nothing against it, and we actually are working on a guidance note, the first guidance note ever, dealing with LGBT refugees, and that's going to come out really soon. And if someone comes out to us, we'll consider giving them refugee status. But nobody does that. So I went one step further back to the NGOs that help the refugees, and there are 1,000 NGOs around the world which are charged with assisting refugees, interviewing people, and I got the same story. Now, you go into these waiting rooms and you understand exactly why it's it's impossible for most people to come out. Our clients go and speak to people who are from the place that they are being interviewed in. It's people who share the culture of the place, who often exhibit the very same the same prejudices that everybody else does. When they go in, they fill in forms that have no indication whatsoever that it's safe to say that you're LGBT, or that it's safe to be LGBT. Many of our clients are harassed by other refugees in the waiting room while they're waiting to be interviewed, if they're a bit effeminate, or if there is any sign whatsoever. Of course, in the cities that they're living, they often are harassed in home. Stones are thrown through the windows. In Turkey, in many cities, our clients are afraid to go out during the day because they can be beaten up. They wait until nighttime. They're thrown out of stores. They're thrown out of shopping centers. On and on and on. And that's the way they struggle to survive day to day. So at ORAM, we developed this project to try to kind of change all of this, to educate the international community, to educate LGBTs around the world about what's happening to our siblings. These are our siblings, and that's what we're trying to drive home everywhere. This is not them and us. This could easily be us. And to try to inculcate an understanding in the international LGBT community, first of all, that this is our responsibility, because no one's going to take care of ours unless we take care of ours. But beyond that, to also educate governments, to educate international institutions, and to assist individual refugees so that they could get to safety. At least some of them could get to safety. So our project in Turkey, we have about 40 clients right now. Almost all of them are from Iran. As you probably know, Iran has executed about 4,000 LGBT since the Islamic Revolution in 1978-79. Nobody knows the exact numbers because they're not published, and most people would prefer to be executed as a thief than to be executed as a homosexual for the sake of the family. So you often don't really know the reason that people are being executed. Most of our clients don't want to leave Iran. Very few do. What happens is typically they hold on. They stay at home. They try to stay in hiding as long as possible, and then a neighbor finds out, or the police finds out, or a party that they're at is raided, and at that point they have 24 hours to pack and get out. And most of our clients don't have money, and so what they do is they get on a bus and they cross to Turkey, which is the only country that Iranians can go to without a visa, and they wait there to get somewhere else, that's safe. This phenomenon is repeated in many, many parts of the world. And then they get to Turkey and they find out that they're living in a tiny little town which is hyper-conservative, which is very homophobic. And our clients in Turkey, I don't know if Jack and Aurelio, if you can tell us, tell everyone some of the experiences of your clients. Our clients tell us that they encounter a lot more homophobia in Turkey, as a practical matter, than they did in Iran, because Iranians won't beat you up on the streets and Turks will. So it's a new kind of reality, and it's a new kind of fear. We work with the clients sometimes for a year and a half, sometimes for 2 years, getting them through the UN system, fighting the UN system, and eventually almost each one of them gets to safety. But it's a very time-consuming, labor-intensive, frustrating process that requires a tremendous amount of attention and a tremendous amount of compassion. Sometimes you just want to shake your client and say, "Come on, let's get it together." You're just going to have to. You're just going to have to say this to the officer, or else you're not going to get refugee status. I can't tell you how many people I've spent before their interview saying, "You're going to have to say that you're homosexual. I know that it's the worst thing in the world for you, but you're going to have to say that because your life depends on it." And most of them do, and some of them don't. So anyway, at the end, I don't want to depress you too much. At the end of the saga, those who are resettled, those who get through the UN process, and who are lucky enough to be among the 1% who get slots, international resettlement slots. Everybody know what resettlement is? It's when a country accepts you as a refugee from outside. Right? So you're sitting in country X and country Y accepts you to be a refugee voluntarily. The U.S. accepts most of the refugees in the world. It's 80,000 a year right now. Those who arrive in the home country have, they think, okay, now it's almost over. Is the screen going down now and the credits are coming up? Wrong. Because now reality starts. And your client arrives in Canada, Australia, the U.S., Sweden, wherever that might be, whoever took them, that's where they're going to go. And then this is the reality. They don't know the language. They often don't have a profession. They're all by themselves. Their own community their own faith community, language community rejects them, and they would never approach them in any case. We've had several clients, from Palestinian clients, who were resettled in Scandinavia, and were given housing among other Palestinians, and were beaten up by those other refugees. So, and again, they're afraid to tell the social worker, even in Sweden. Can you imagine being afraid to tell a social worker in Sweden? It's about internalized homophobia. And they struggle to somehow make it. And most of them do make it, but the reality is really tough. Here in the United States, the refugee system is built on family unification, and that's how the vast majority of the 80,000 refugees a year that are integrated into the U.S. make it. What happens is a family or their own community sponsors them. They're brought into their own, usually church, and then are given the support to make it here. It means people, take them to the Social Security office and to the doctor and to English class. Federal assistance here is 8 months long. After 8 months, you're cut off from all federal assistance, including medical assistance. So there's not a lot of time to make it. So it's pretty tough, even if you have family here. If you've got family, you've got a place to live, and you've got somebody who loves you, and somebody says you're okay, and you're a worthwhile human being, and you are a being that is worthy of survival. But our clients don't have that kind of preparation in life. Our clients heard from age 0 that their fate is worse than a cockroach. They've been told over and over again that they don't deserve to survive, that they're a source of shame for their families and for their cultures, and that they don't need to live, and they carry that with them. They've also been denied education. They were afraid to go to school, many of them, because they were afraid to be beaten up at school. They were cut off from financial systems. They're cut off from their families, and then they arrive here and they have nothing. And then our Muslim Iranian queer arrives in San Antonio, Texas, and goes into the offices of the Catholic Charities. Not making this up. And has got to deal with who am I, who are these people, how am I possibly going to make it, who am I going to tell who I am. And our clients very often, we found after coming to the U.S., would become homeless pretty soon afterwards, because federal funding is $2,000 for 8 months. And they don't know the language and they don't have jobs. Anyway, we started a project recently to bring clients to the San Francisco area. And we found a resettlement agency, one organization in the whole country that agreed to resettle our clients. And they will start arriving either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. I've been speaking to a lot of groups, not asking for money, although we love financial support, but because we, the community, need to be that family that these people don't have. When they start arriving, and it's not going to be many, when they start arriving, there are going to need to be people here who have the compassion to reach out and to say, I'll be the person who'll take you to the doctor, or we have a room in the house, I'll rent you a room so that you can have a safe place, so you can have a place that you belong to, so you don't have to work the streets. And we need to start building support within our community. That means that each of you, I couldn't ask anything more of you than when you leave today, talk to some people that you know about what's happening, and talk to some people talk to your friends about the fact that we need to act like family. We need to start being family, because we don't have any other family, and to take care of our own. I'd like to open up to questions now, if you don't mind. Yes?
Well, correct any of my misperceptions or misinformation, but it seems awfully paradoxical because in a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, I think the sexes are segregated. Men and women don't have a lot of interaction prior to marriage, so that even a lot of heterosexual men probably engage in homosexual behavior. And so and recently there was a documentary about the dancing boys of Afghanistan that came out. And so it seems like there's a lot of homosexual behavior that's going on that's culturally accepted, but if you can pass as heterosexual, it's not a problem. But it must be so confusing to the ones that really identify as gay, lesbian, or bi, to see the accepted homosexual behavior, yet for some reason they're beaten up or persecuted. And then like that person in Turkey that had to perform homosexual behavior to make money because he wasn't supposed to be homosexual. It just seems so paradoxical.
It is paradoxical. I mean, it's one of the biggest secrets of the Middle East in a lot of ways. Because when you go to the Middle East, you see that homosexuality is everywhere. Men walk hand in hand, and you might think that that's homosexual behavior, but that's deemed not to be. There are very strict rules in the Middle East about what you can and can't do, and you can't break those rules. And one of the rules is that you cannot identify as an adult homosexual. You can't declare that you intend to live with another man as your partner or another woman as your partner if you're a woman. And you can't talk about your homosexual behavior. It's something that everyone knows exists but isn't discussed. One of the things that we discovered fairly early was, because we take down our clients' stories, 10, 20 pages of history, which we need to do to present their cases for refugee status. What we found out is that easily more than half of our clients have been sexually abused as children. And I'm not talking about one instance of sexual abuse, but a decade of sexual abuse. So when a little boy turns out to be effeminate, seems a little effeminate, or when a little girl is a little too masculine, or there are other hints that they may be potentially gay or lesbian, it's almost always a male neighbor or a male relative will start abusing the child repeatedly sexually, and it's often because of the unavailability of women in those cultures for sexual intimacy, that usually little boys, but sometimes also little girls are picked out and used sexually for year after year after year. and then ashamed. And they're told that if you tell your neighbors, I'm going to tell your parents that you did this and that you liked it. Now, as you probably know, in the Middle East, in many cultures, a girl who's lost her virginity can be killed by her family easily because it's her fault. And the same is true for a little boy who has sexual relations. Now, imagine what it's like if you are being used by a neighbor. In fact, you've been raped by your neighbor, but there's a part of the relation with another man that titillates you or that interests you, and so you feel shame at the same time that this is going on, and you don't talk to anybody about it. There's also the issue in the Middle East that there's what we here in the West call top and bottom in American gay male culture. In the Middle East, typically the insertive male partner is not a homosexual. It's the passive partner who's the homosexual. And in Iran, in fact, Sharia law distinguishes between the insertive and the passive partner. Receptive partner, thank you. The insertive and the receptive partner. And the receptive partner gets the death penalty, whereas the insertive partner doesn't in some settings. So it's very carefully defined. So these rules are rules that you can't break. And one of the rules is one of the things you couldn't do is what we're doing here today. A group of gay men sitting in a room and women sitting in a room and saying, some of us are openly gay, and this is the life that we want to live. So I hope I've answered your question.
Could you just tell me which agency are you working with locally? You said you're going to be working with an agency to pair people up.
Yeah, the agency is the Jewish Family and Children's Services, which is a contractor of the U.S. government. It's one of the agencies that resettles refugees in the Bay Area, one of the two.
You also said you were going to talk about volunteer opportunities. Were you going to mention any others? Or is that what you...
I didn't say that, but I'm really glad you raised that. Our offices are in downtown San Francisco on Drum Street, and we need volunteers. We need people who have professional skills, people who are able to help with newsletters, with communication, and with organizing events and functions, and with fundraising. Yes, sir.
Do you need people who can translate? Is language a problem?
Yeah, of course, language is a problem. Right now our biggest need is for Farsi, for Dari and for Farsi, and for Arabic. Not at the moment, but it could arise at any time. So we'd love to have a bank of people who are available. We have our website up right now in Farsi, German, and French, and people who know those languages are very much needed.
I did have a question, actually. You were talking about people not coming forward and approaching. In most of the, not most, in any of the languages, there is no neutral word for gay, and there's a word for pederast and other damning words, but there is no neutral word, so it would be very hard for someone to come forward and identify, because there just isn't the vocabulary, unless you are westernized, and that happens when you're urbanized. Then you have, the words gay and homosexual and all of that. So my question was, what percentage of what would you estimate of your clients, Iranian or Turks or Malawians, whatever, are urban or urbanized, as opposed to, what percentage would be rural and not exposed at all to Western media?
I'd probably say 80 urbanized, 20 non-urbanized. The question was, who's coming from urban areas, right? And then the second question is who's living in urban areas later. Most LGBTs will be drawn to urban areas, both in the home country, and then once they cross the border, they'll absolutely be drawn to a big city if there is one. Our urban clients are at a huge advantage over the rural ones. So the urban ones usually speak some foreign language, have some exposure to foreign culture, and have exposure to the internet. And the rural ones I think most of the rural ones are just have their throats slit in the field and never actually get to cross the border, if I can be that blunt. The ones that we have a few of them. We have one who was just recently denied, and I don't think we're going to succeed in his case because he's from a rural family, a very devout Islamic rural family in northern Iran. He was sexually abused for years and years and years, and he can't talk about it. He gets into the interview and he freezes, and he just can't testify about it. The reason I'm mentioning this is that had he been living in a city and had he come into contact with other LGBTs and started to be able to come to terms with who he is and what he is, he'd have a fighting chance, but he doesn't. Because where he comes from, it's completely unacceptable to people who he is. Yes.
I have two quick questions. One is I know that Turkey is trying to become part of the European Union. They haven't yet, though, have they?
No.
But I know that part of the factor there is their human rights treatment. So is the government there making? It sounds like a lot of the case histories, which I'm like, for people that came from a worse, like a country like Afghanistan or Iran to Turkey, is the government or any agency making no attempts to improve their treatment or their situation or to respond to that kind of violence against them?
It's a great question.
Because I know that for a while, I mean, I was reading in like the New York Times and stuff how they knew they were in this Turkey, the government of Turkey at least was in the spotlight or under the eye of the rest of the European Union because they were appealing to become part of it to their economic benefit, obviously. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, part of that was, we'll look at your human rights record and trying to at least make a show that they were, improving things. But I don't know, in real on the ground, if they're really making things a bit easier for homosexuals. It's really complex and it's really paradoxical. I spend a ton of time in Turkey and I can't tell you that I even understand everything that's going on. I don't. Most people are assuming today that Turkey will not be admitted into the EU. Oh, really?
Most people in the EU will tell you that they're assuming that. Most Turks will tell you that they're assuming that.
And is it on those grounds? It's human rights related?
Ostensibly, it's human rights related. There's really, we're going to get off into really far areas. I think the basic reason is that Turkey is a country of 70 million Muslims, in trying to be admitted into a continent that's overwhelmingly Christian and in fact and increasingly Islamophobic. So I think that lies behind why so many Europeans are resistant to Turkey's admission. But the human rights record is definitely being used as an obstacle for its admission. In Turkey, what's happening though? And keep in mind, I'm not a Turkey expert. I'm a queer refugee expert. What's happening inside Turkey is that while this game is being played and the show is being put on for the exterior world, there have in fact been some steps taken to safeguard very basic appearances of it being safe to be LGBT. The Turkish Supreme Court held last year, the Turkish government closes down all LGBT organizations and watches all their communication and freezes their bank accounts. There was one organization, Lambda Istanbul, which took its closure to the Supreme Court 2 years ago. And the Supreme Court of Turkey held that Lambda could stay open as long as it didn't promote homosexuality. So I don't know how you promote homosexuality.
That could be defined by whoever is doing the enforcing, right?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Turkey has had tens of honor killings, tens of killings of transgenders in the last year alone. The crimes are never investigated. A Western gay man was just killed by his father a few months ago in Istanbul, and the crime wasn't investigated. Homosexuality is still very much forbidden.
It sounds like a very blurry line where they're not being admitted because of their Islam or because the conservative Islam branch is intolerant of things like this. So it's kind of a blurry line to say, is it just because they're their faith, or is it because their faith automatically says is intolerant of homosexuals?
I think the answer is very complex, and it includes other factors. What I wanted to add, though, I mean, we shouldn't spend too much time talking about Turkey, fascinating as it is that what's happened in the meantime in Turkey is that an Islamist government has come to power and is trying to bring the country in line with Islamic values. The government has proposed a referendum now that all the Supreme Court justices be appointed by the government, with no opportunity for the parliament to veto. So Turkey is going closer and closer to Iran in terms of values.
We have time for one more.
Jack?
Please.
Well, I just wanted to say a little bit about two things. One is because I guess I'm the reason that Neil's here today. I heard him on our local gay radio show on KLW late last year, and found the story so compelling. Talk about the death suffering, which is a major, or at least a significant part of Buddhist understanding of the world, and one of our charges is to help reduce suffering. This is such a direct application of that. It's moved. So I got in touch with the organization, and so that's kind of the Buddhist angle on this, I think. Is, gay Buddhist, but this is the gay part too. And ORAM has set up a program where you can adopt a refugee, and so we did adopt two, one from Iran and one from Kazakhstan. Both of them had already escaped to Turkey, and so we've followed them. We've had some correspondence with them, and it puts a face. It's just two guys. One guy so far is out. But if I were that guy, that would be important. And my reaction is, there, but for the grace of God with Buddha, would I be in the same situation? So it just seemed incumbent to try and do something. So we adopted these two guys, and we were just thrilled that last week one of them was finally relocated to Australia in Melbourne. They got in verklempt. And we've had some communication with him. In fact, last week we had a Skype conversation with this kid. He's a 27-year-old graphic designer who spent 2 years in Turkey.
Yeah.
And so he's out now. He's starting this new, completely different cultural life in Melbourne. The other, I guess, is still having some problems getting out. But that's essentially it. Mm-hmm. And I'm all in support of our issues in America here, gay marriage and gays in the military and all that, which is important. And since we're supposedly sort of cultural leaders, those issues are important too. But these guys over there, it's a literal matter of life and death. And so I thought this was Buddhism in action.
And there is much that you can do beyond the adopting. As I think Neil pointed out, these people are going to need contacts. These people are going to need resources to point them in the direction of gain gainful employment. They're going to need a roof over their head. They're going to need somebody to orient them in the various cities that to which they are eventually assigned. And given the powers that we have with, I guess I would call global connection with other people, either through social networking, we really do have a hand in creating an environment that will be welcoming of these refugees.
Well, and actually I realized that he's a big Facebook guy, and he got this guy, Hamid, in touch with a Facebook friend in Melbourne, and so that's where...
Wonderful.
So he's got a roof over his head, free place to stay, two really sweet guys that are making sure, literally taking him under a wing. They're the uncles, Hamid refers to us as, and it's quite moving in some of the correspondence that we've had. He refers to us as his dads, and in the course of correspondence, I just kind of questioned. I said, how do you think of us as an uncle? He said, no. He said, parents give life. You have given me a new life. You are my father. That's very, very, very powerful. And we haven't done that much. We've just given a few $100s and for each, and ensure that we did the best that we can to make the connections with people who would, responsible people would follow up and ensure that to do their part to whatever they can do to ensure that they are well taken care of and are acclimated to the various societies that they, well, at least that Hamid is going to be in. But it can be done, and it can be done easily. So I think that the important question for all of us to ask is, what can we as individuals do, and what can we do collectively if one person doesn't have the bohu bucks to throw in the direction of ORAM? Well, several of you get together, share the cost, share a child, share a son, share a daughter. You can do that. It's not that difficult.
Thank you. Neil, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. Will you be able to stay for the social hour?
Sure, why not? I'd love to. I'd love to.
Did you bring literature with you?
I did. I brought just a little bit. I didn't want to overwhelm you with literature. There's a couple of leaflets on the table outside, and if you're interested, just send me an email, and we'll send you a lot more stuff.
I started to see it, more shows of hands for questions, so you'll have to come back another time.
It's a pleasure.
And do another round with us.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Are there any announcements today? Sure.
Hi. Neil, thanks for coming and speaking to us. And next week, John Draco will be here with us. He's a Scottish Zen priest. Very interesting.
I'm Cass. I'm your host today. So please stay and enjoy the Fellowship of the Sangha. We have snacks and tea. So help yourself. If you have tea, please wash a cup with hot soapy water. I'll be coming around with the Donna bowl. Please feel free to donate whatever you care to help the Sangha meet its expenses. $5 to $8 is considered. Is suggested. And at the end of the social hour, some people get together and go out to lunch. Everybody is welcome to join. And they meet at the front door around 12:30.
Thanks, Cass. Any other announcements? Okay.
Yes, I'm Kei Matsuda, and I'm the host coordinator for GBF, and we currently have a couple of vacancies on our hosting team. So if you're interested in becoming Sunday morning host at GBF meetings, please let me know. Thank you.
And a quick shout out to the gentlemen that are here with us today, and also to Stephen, who's from Portland, who joins us whenever he can when he's in San Francisco. It's nice having you here again. Let's go ahead and stand for the dedication of
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.